There are moments in life that feel completely ordinary while they are happening. Moments where nothing around you signals danger. No warning. No alarm. Just a regular evening that looks exactly like 100 evenings before it. Daniel had one of those moments on a Friday night in October. And he did not know, not even for a single second, that it would be the last normal night of his life. Daniel was 34 years old. He lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of a city, in a house he had spent 3 years saving for. It was not a big house. It was not a fancy house. But it had a warm kitchen where his wife, Sarah, made coffee every morning before the sun came up. It had a small backyard where his 5-year-old son, Lucas, chased butterflies on summer afternoons. It had a bedroom where Daniel would fall asleep every night thinking that he was, without question, the luckiest man he knew. He worked as a site supervisor at a construction company. The job was demanding and the hours were long, but Daniel took pride in what he did. He was respected at work. His team trusted him. His boss had already spoken to him twice about a promotion that was coming before the end of the year. Everything in Daniel's life was moving in the right direction. Slowly, steadily, and surely. The way good things usually move when a person works hard and stays focused. Sarah was a nurse. She worked rotating shifts at the local hospital, and despite the exhaustion that came with her job, she never once came home without a smile for Lucas and a warm word for Daniel. They had met in their mid-20s, dated for 2 years, and built everything they had together, piece by piece, without any shortcuts. Their relationship was not perfect. No relationship is. But it was honest. It was committed. It was the kind of love that does not shout from rooftops, but quietly holds everything together from the inside. Lucas was their world. He had his mother's eyes and his father's laugh, and he had a way of walking into a room and immediately making it feel lighter. Daniel coached his little weekend football team on Saturdays. Sarah read him 2 stories every night before bed. They were a family in the truest sense of that word. Not just people living under the same roof, but people who had chosen each other every single day, without needing a reason to. That Friday evening, Daniel finished work a little early. The site had gone quiet for the weekend, paperwork was done, and his team had already left. He called Sarah on his way to the car park. She told him dinner would be ready by 7. Lucas had already asked twice what time his father was coming home. Daniel smiled at that. He told her he would be there by 6:30. He meant it. At that moment, standing in the dusty car park with the autumn wind cutting through his jacket, he absolutely meant it. His phone buzzed before he even started the engine. It was Marcus. They had been friends since secondary school, nearly 2 decades of history between them. Marcus was the kind of person who could make any ordinary evening feel like a celebration. He had a gift for laughter and a talent for convincing people to stay longer than they planned. The message was simple. A few of the old group were meeting at a bar near the city center, just for a couple of hours. Nothing serious. Come on, it said. You never come out anymore. Daniel sat in his car for a moment. He thought about Sarah's voice on the phone. He thought about Lucas asking when he was coming home. And then he thought about Marcus, about the group, about how long it had been since he had just sat with his friends and laughed without worrying about anything. He picked up the phone and typed back. Just for an hour, he said. He genuinely believed that. He did not go home first. He told himself he would just stop in, say hello, have one drink, and leave before dinner got cold. That was the plan. A clean, simple 1-hour plan. He parked 2 streets away from the bar and walked in with his jacket collar turned up against the cold. The moment he pushed open the door and heard his name called from across the room, the plan began to loosen. Just slightly. Just enough. There were 6 of them at the table. Old friends from the years before responsibility and mortgages and school runs. The kind of friends with whom time collapses the moment you sit down together. Someone ordered a round. Then another. The conversation flowed easily, the way it always did with that group, jumping from football to work to old memories that grew funnier with every year that passed. Daniel laughed harder than he had in months. He did not notice the time. Sarah called at 8:15. He stepped outside to answer, and the cold air hit him in a way that made him realize for the first time that he had drunk more than he intended. He told her he was sorry. He told her something had come up with the group. He promised he would not be long. Sarah's voice was calm, but he could hear the tightness underneath it. She said Lucas had already eaten and gone to bed. She said his dinner was in the oven. She said, "Just come home soon, Daniel." He promised. He went back inside. She called again at 10. This time, Daniel felt his phone vibrate in his pocket and watched her name light up the screen. He looked at it. He looked at his friends. He put the phone face down on the table and let it ring out. He told himself he would call her back in 10 minutes. He did not call her back. Not in 10 minutes. Not in 20. Not at all. There was a voice inside him that evening. A quiet, steady voice that had been speaking since the second round of drinks. It said, "Go home." It said, "You have had enough." It said, "The people who love you are waiting." But Daniel had become very good at something dangerous that night. He had become very good at not listening. Every time that voice rose up, there was a laugh, a story, a fresh glass placed in front of him, and the voice would sink back down beneath the noise. By 11:30, the bar was beginning to thin out. Marcus suggested they move on somewhere else, but Daniel said no. He said he needed to get home. He said it with the kind of certainty that only comes right before a person makes a terrible choice. The others offered to share a taxi. One of them, a friend called Pete, said directly to Daniel's face, "You should not be driving tonight." Daniel waved him off. He said he was fine. He said it was just 10 minutes down the road. He said he drove that road every day. He said a lot of things that night that were not true. The car park was quiet when he got back to it. The streets were nearly empty. The city had gone to sleep, and under the orange glow of the street lamps, everything looked calm and still and deceptively safe. Daniel sat in the driver's seat for a moment. He gripped the steering wheel. He told himself to focus. He pulled out of the car park slowly, carefully, the way a person drives when they are trying very hard to appear sober. For the first 3 minutes, nothing happened. The road was straight and familiar. He told himself he had been right. He told himself Pete had been overreacting. He turned onto the wider road that led toward the suburbs, and the speed limit rose, and without realizing it, his foot followed. The radio was low. The heater was on. He was almost home. He was almost there. He never saw the bend coming. Not the way he should have. His reaction was half a second too slow, and in the dark, at that speed, half a second is everything. The car left the road. It hit the curb with a force that jolted through his whole body, and then the world turned sideways. There was a sound he would never be able to properly describe to anyone, a sound of metal and glass and everything breaking at once. And then there was nothing. Just darkness. Just silence. He woke up to lights. Bright, white, blinding lights above him, and a smell that he slowly recognized as a hospital. There was a dull, enormous pain in his left shoulder and his ribs, and when he tried to move, a nurse stepped forward and told him gently not to. He looked around the room. He looked at the door. He looked at every corner of that space, searching for a face he recognized. There was no one. He was alone. The car had rolled twice before stopping against a low wall. A man walking his dog had seen it happen and called the emergency services. The paramedics had arrived within 8 minutes. Daniel had been unconscious for most of the journey to the hospital. He had a broken collarbone, 3 fractured ribs, a deep cut above his left eye that had required 12 stitches, and a bruised lung that would trouble him for weeks. The doctors told him he was lucky. They used that word without irony. They meant it medically. But lying there in that hospital bed, alone, at 2 in the morning, Daniel did not feel lucky in any sense of that word. He asked a nurse if someone had called his wife. The nurse said they had contacted the number on his emergency form. He nodded and looked at the ceiling. The ceiling had nothing to offer him. He lay there and waited, and the waiting was its own kind of pain, separate from anything physical. A slow and creeping dread that began somewhere in his chest and spread outward with every minute that passed in silence. Sarah did not come that night. He understood why. Lucas was 5 years old and asleep, and she had no one to leave him with at 2 in the morning. He understood it. But understanding something and feeling it are two entirely different experiences. And what Daniel felt in that hospital room, in the dark, with no hand to hold and no voice to reassure him, was a loneliness so complete that it pressed down on him like a physical weight. He was discharged 2 days later. His collarbone was in a sling. His ribs made every breath a small, careful effort. The hospital gave him pain medication and a follow-up appointment and a leaflet about road safety that he folded and put in his jacket pocket without reading. A taxi took him home because he had no car anymore. The car was a write-off. The driver made small talk and Daniel answered in single words and watched the streets pass by the window. The house looked the same from the outside. Same front door. Same small garden. Same curtains he and Sarah had chosen together from a market 3 years ago. He paid the taxi driver and stood on the pavement for a moment before walking up the path. Something already felt wrong. The air around the house had a different quality to it. He could not explain it, but he felt it before he even put his key in the lock. The hallway was too quiet. He called Sarah's name. Nothing. He walked into the kitchen. The table was clear. The coffee machine was gone. He walked into the living room and saw the gaps on the shelves where photographs used to stand. He walked upstairs, and at the door to Lucas's room, he stopped. The room was still there. The bed was still there. But the small row of stuffed animals that lived along the windowsill was gone. The little blue backpack that always hung on the back of the door was gone. On the kitchen counter, there was a single envelope with his name written on it in Sarah's handwriting. He stood and looked at it for a long time before picking it up. The letter inside was not long. Sarah was not a person who wasted words. She told him she had taken Lucas to her mother's house. She told him she was not ending their marriage, not yet, but that she could not look at him right now. She told him she had stood in that hospital corridor for 10 minutes before deciding to leave without going in. She told him she was not angry at the accident. She was angry at every choice that had led to it. She told him that she had felt this moment coming for a long time, and that this was not the first time she had felt afraid of losing him. It was just the first time she had let herself admit it. He folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. He sat down on the kitchen floor, right there on the coal tiles, and he stayed there for a very long time. The weeks that followed were the hardest of his life. His company had a strict policy on incidents that involved legal matters, and the police had charged Daniel with driving under the influence. His employer was understanding, but understanding has limits, and the promotion he had been expecting quietly disappeared from the conversation. He kept his job, but just barely, and he knew that trust, once broken in a professional setting, does not rebuild quickly. He saw Lucas on weekends at Sarah's mother's house for 2 hours at a time. Lucas would run to him and climb into his arms, and Daniel would hold his son and press his face into the boy's hair and breathe in and try very hard not to fall apart in front of him. Lucas was too young to understand what had happened. He just knew that his father was not at home, and sometimes he would ask, in the simple and devastating way that only children can, when they were all going to be together again. Daniel would say soon, because there was no honest answer that a 5-year-old could carry. He started attending a support group for people dealing with alcohol-related incidents. He did not go willingly at first. His lawyer suggested it as part of a broader effort to demonstrate changed behavior. But something happened in that room that Daniel had not expected. He sat in a circle of strangers who had lost different things in different ways, and he listened to their stories, and he realized that none of them had set out to destroy anything. Every single person in that room had told themselves, at some crucial moment, that they were fine, that it was just this once, that the voice telling them to stop was exaggerating. He thought about Pete standing in the car park, saying you should not be driving. He thought about Sarah's missed calls lighting up a screen. He thought about the voice inside him, steady and clear and completely ignored. He had not been ambushed by that night. He had walked into it with open eyes and closed ears, and there was something uniquely painful about that realization, something that no external punishment could match. He began writing letters to Sarah, not to convince her of anything, not to argue or explain or ask for forgiveness. just to tell her things he should have said while they were still sitting across from each other at dinner. He wrote about the morning Lucas was born and how Daniel had cried in the hospital corridor in a way he had never cried before or since. He wrote about the feeling of watching her sleep and thinking that he did not deserve someone that steady and that kind. He wrote about the promotion and how he had planned to take her somewhere nice to celebrate and had imagined her face when he told her. He wrote about all of it, and he put the letters in a drawer, and he did not send them. Sarah came to the house one evening in December, 6 weeks after the accident. Lucas was at her mother's. She sat at the kitchen table, and Daniel made 2 cups of tea, and they talked for nearly 3 hours. She told him she had been waiting for him to crack for a long time. Not because she wanted him to fail, but because she had sensed something slipping in him long before that Friday night. The late evenings that stretched longer than planned. The distracted mornings. The way he sometimes looked at her without really seeing her. She had been trying to reach him for months, and she had not known how to say that without it becoming a fight. Daniel listened. He did not defend himself. There was nothing to defend. Everything she said was true, and the truest things are often the hardest to sit still for. He told her he was sorry. He told her he had been running from something he could not name, and that running had felt like living until it did not anymore. She did not forgive him that evening. She was honest about that. She told him forgiveness was not a switch she could flip, that it was a long and uncertain road, and that she was not sure where it led. He told her that was fair, and he meant it. The court hearing came in January. Daniel stood in front of a judge and heard himself described in the language of official proceedings, and it was one of the most humbling experiences of his life. He was fined, given a suspended sentence, and lost his driving license for 18 months. He walked out of the courthouse into the cold January air and stood on the steps for a long moment, looking at a city that was moving normally around him, people walking and talking and carrying on with ordinary life, and he felt the full weight of the distance between where he had been and where he now stood. Spring came slowly. Daniel kept going to his support group. He kept showing up to the weekend visits with Lucas. He kept making the tea and cleaning the house and go to work and doing every ordinary, unglamorous thing that recovery is actually made of. There was no single moment where everything turned around. That is not how real life works. There were just small choices made quietly, day after day, that began to point in a different direction. Sarah asked him to come to Lucas's school play in April. It was the first time they had been somewhere together since the accident. He sat beside her in the school hall, and Lucas came onto the stage in a paper crown, and both of them laughed at exactly the same moment, and for just a second, it felt like something fragile was being held very carefully by 2 people who were both afraid of dropping it. He never sent those letters. But one afternoon, sitting in the kitchen, he told Sarah everything that was in them. She listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she sat quietly for a moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over his. She did not say anything. She did not have to. Daniel will tell you now, if you ask him, that he did not lose his world in one night. He built toward that loss over a long time, through small surrenders and ignored warnings and the slow habit of choosing the easier thing over the true thing. The accident was not the cause of what happened to his life. It was the consequence. It was the moment all the small unpaid debts came due at once. He will tell you that the most dangerous lie a person can tell themselves is that they are fine, that one more will not matter, that the voice asking them to stop is being dramatic. He will tell you that the people who love you the most are often the ones watching you walk toward the edge long before you feel the ground begin to disappear beneath your feet. He will tell you that losing everything is not always a dramatic, sudden event. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is a wife's name on a screen that you choose not to answer. Sometimes it is a hand on your shoulder in a car park, a friend's voice saying you should not do this, and the moment you walk away from that voice and toward the car door. Sometimes the night that takes everything from you begins long before midnight. It begins the moment you decide that what you want right now matters more than what you are building. If you are reading this and you recognize something in Daniel's story, listen to the voice. The one that is quiet and steady and easy to ignore. Listen to it tonight before it becomes a story that someone else is reading. Go home. Answer the call. Choose the people waiting for you over the moment trying to keep you. Because the world you are taking for granted right now, the coffee in the kitchen, the child who asked when you are coming home, the person who loves you more carefully than you sometimes deserve, is not guaranteed. It can be lost. Not in some distant, hypothetical future. In one night. In one choice. In one moment where you decide that voice does not know what it is talking about. Daniel knows now that it does. He learned that lesson at a price no person should have to pay. Do not wait to learn it the same way.